The galaxy was vast and full of life, and in that endless sea of stars there was the Galactic Empire. It ruled with iron hands and sharp claws, and its name alone was enough to silence entire worlds. For hundreds of years it expanded further, and further crushing every new species it found and bending them to its laws. Fear was the foundation of its power. When ships of the Empire appeared in the sky, people of other planets dropped their weapons and bowed their heads because they knew what would follow if they resisted. Cities burned. Leaders were taken. Entire cultures were wiped away if they did not obey. The Empire never failed. Or at least that was what they believed. Far away on the edge of the galaxy there was a blue planet called Earth. Most of the galaxy did not even know it existed. To some it was only a rumor. A place where a strange and reckless species lived. Some explorers claimed to have seen humans long ago, but others said humans were only myths. The Empire had so many worlds under its control that one small world could not matter. But eventually scouts of the Empire found it. They reported back that Earth had a population that was not advanced enough to fight starships. It had weapons made for wars on its own soil and ships that could only touch the edge of space. To the commanders of the Empire it seemed easy. Earth would be theirs within days. They prepared fleets and soldiers and thought of Earth as a small prize to show the rest of the galaxy that no world could escape them. When the ships came, they filled the skies. People looked up from their homes and streets and fields and saw giant shadows that blocked the sun. Engines roared above the clouds. The ground shook as massive cruisers descended. For the first time, Earth saw the face of the Empire. Soldiers in silver armor marched out with weapons glowing. The commanders of the Empire expected fear. They thought humans would fall to their knees and beg for mercy. They thought it would be like every other world they had conquered. But what they saw was something they had never seen before. People laughed. On a street in Dallas, a young mechanic named Daniel Brooks wiped his hands on a rag and looked up at the massive ship hovering over the city. His sister Megan stood beside him, staring at the dark shape in the clouds. She was calm, but her eyes burned with fire. Daniel shook his head and laughed. He did not laugh because he was not afraid. He laughed because the sight was so unreal and so arrogant that fear turned into something else. Around him, neighbors came out of their houses, pointing phones at the sky, recording videos. Some cheered, some cursed. But there was no surrender. Megan crossed her arms and spoke softly to her brother. "They think they are gods." Daniel smirked and answered, "Then let us show them what mortals can do." The first dropships landed in Houston. Alien soldiers marched out in perfect lines. Their weapons could cut steel. Their machines could walk through buildings. The first orders were given to gather the population in the center and demand obedience. But as they tried to enforce, control shots rang out. Not from the Empire, but from rooftops and alleys. Hunters with old rifles fired. Veterans with scars from human wars threw grenades made in basements. Teenagers threw bottles filled with fire. The streets exploded in chaos. The soldiers of the Empire did not expect it. Their training told them resistance would collapse once the first city fell. But here, every street corner was a battlefield. Jason Carter, a former Marine, took command of whoever was willing to fight. He stood on a burned-out truck with a radio and shouted directions. He did not have a grand army, but he had people with courage. He split them into groups, hit fast, strike hard, then vanish. That was the way to fight, and it worked. The armored soldiers of the Empire stumbled under the sudden fury. Entire patrols vanished in alleys. Machines burned when gasoline and fire spread across them. The people of Houston did not see themselves as soldiers but as survivors, and they laughed while fighting. They laughed because death was close, but freedom was worth the risk. High above, an alien officer watched the battle on screens. He slammed, his clawed hand on the console. "They are not afraid," he shouted. "Even as they die, they laugh." Why? None of his crew could answer. They had studied hundreds of worlds, but none had reacted like this. Fear was not working. And without fear, their advantage crumbled. The days that followed were brutal. The Empire leveled blocks of the city with energy weapons. Entire neighborhoods turned to dust. Yet at night, resistance groups moved through the rubble, planting bombs and setting traps. Jason became known as a ghost leader who struck and disappeared. Daniel and Megan turned their garage into a workshop where weapons were built from scrap. Megan learned to handle explosives, and Daniel rigged trucks with steel plates. People whispered their names in the ruins, the siblings who refused to bow in no. Another part of the world, a woman named Laura Mitchell, listened to the broadcasts of chaos. She was a scientist who once dreamed of satellites and stars. Now she sat in a hidden bunker beneath mountains, sending messages over hacked radio signals. Her calm voice carried through the static. They think fear will break us, but we have lived with fear for all of history. We faced wars, we faced disasters, we faced death, and we are still here. We will not kneel. Her words reached across cities and villages, giving strength to people who thought they were alone. For the first time, humanity began to fight as one world, not as separate nations. The Empire sent more troops, more machines, more fire. But the laughter spread. Soldiers of the Empire whispered in fear about humans who would not stop. They told stories of fighters who stood against entire squads and went down smiling. The commanders grew angry. They called Earth a disease that needed to be crushed. Yet every time they thought they had won, another fire lit in another city. Daniel and Megan fought through the ruins of Chicago alongside Jason. They used traps and tunnels to bring down armored walkers. In the dark, they shared food and stories with other fighters. Sometimes they cried for those they lost. But then someone would make a joke, and laughter would fill the room again. Laughter was their shield. It gave them courage when weapons and numbers were against them. The galaxy watched in silence, and other species who had suffered under the Empire intercepted the hacked signals of Laura. They expected to hear screams of surrender, but they heard defiance. They heard laughter. For the first time, they wondered if the Empire could be stopped. And the humans on Earth kept fighting. They were not a myth anymore. They were real, they were loud, and they were not afraid. The war spread quickly across the world. What began in Houston and Dallas soon burned through Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. The Empire sent legions of soldiers and machines into every continent. In Europe, cruisers hovered over Paris and Berlin, demanding surrender. In Asia, they marched through Beijing and Tokyo. In Africa, they descended on Cairo and Johannesburg. Every city was a target. The Empire wanted to crush humanity fast to prove that no one could resist them. But instead of silence, the galaxy heard something new. The sound of human defiance. In the ruins of Houston, Jason Carter still fought with his group of survivors. He was tired, his body scarred, his eyes dark from lack of sleep, but his spirit never broke. He moved from street to street, showing civilians how to make traps out of broken cars and explosives out of fuel tanks. At night, he spoke to them with calm words. "We are not soldiers, we are people fighting for our homes, remember that." And every person he spoke to found new courage. Daniel Brooks and his sister Megan joined him whenever they could, bringing new fighters from the north. Their garage had turned into a hidden factory. They welded steel to trucks, turning them into moving walls. They built weapons from captured alien rifles and gave them to anyone willing to fight. Megan became known for her sharp eyes and steady hands. Daniel for his humor that never died even in the worst moments. When someone was afraid, Daniel cracked a joke and the fear turned into laughter. The Empire answered with fire. Whole neighborhoods burned. Thousands were killed. Alien commanders stood in their ships looking down at the destruction, certain that this time humanity would break. But as smoke filled the sky, voices rose through hacked radios. Laura Mitchell spoke again from her secret bunker. "They believe they can erase us with fire, but we are more than buildings and streets. We are people, we are memory, we are laughter. And as long as one of us stands, the fire will never win." Her message spread across the world and even beyond Earth. Other enslaved races began to hear her words. To them it was unthinkable. A species standing against the Empire and refusing to kneel. Many whispered that the humans were mad, but madness was contagious. In Chicago, Daniel, Megan, and Jason planned raids. They studied the movement of alien patrols and struck at weak points. They attacked supply trucks, stealing food and weapons. They learned how to disable enemy walkers by planting charges at their knees. At night, they sat around fires in the underground tunnels, eating whatever scraps they had. They laughed and shared stories of their lives before the invasion. Jason told of deserts where he fought wars between men. Megan told of long nights fixing engines with her brother. Daniel teased her until she rolled her eyes. In those moments, they felt human again, not just soldiers, and in the morning they rose to fight once more. The Empire grew restless. Reports came in of ambushes in Asia where farmers had taken down soldiers with traps in rice fields. In Africa, hunters turned the forests into deadly grounds for patrols. In South America, fighters hid in mountains striking supply lines. Everywhere they went, humans fought with whatever they had. It was not an organized army. It was chaos. But it was chaos the Empire could not control. Alien commanders had no answer. They were trained to crush armies, not people who refused to act like soldiers. They tried fear, but fear only made humans laugh louder. One night in the ruins of Chicago, Megan climbed to the roof of a destroyed library. She looked out over the city and saw the glow of fires in the distance. Daniel joined her, carrying a rifle on his shoulder. He handed her a piece of stale bread and sat beside her. "Think we will make it?" he asked. Megan chewed slowly and shrugged. "Maybe not, but maybe that is not the point." Daniel raised a brow. "Then what is?" She turned her gaze to the stars. "To show them we will not kneel. Even if we die, we will not kneel." Daniel smiled and laughed quietly. "That is good enough for me." In the mountains, Laura and her small team studied captured alien devices. She worked, day and night, breaking into their systems. At first it seemed impossible. The technology was centuries ahead of Earth. But slowly patterns appeared. She found that the energy cores of their machines overheated under certain conditions. She discovered their communications had gaps that could be exploited. Every breakthrough was passed to fighters across the globe. She became the unseen brain of the resistance. And even when her bunker was attacked, she escaped and built another. Her voice always returned to the airwaves, calm, steady, and unshaken. The Empire could burn her shelters, but it could not burn her will. Weeks turned into months. The Empire leveled entire cities, but resistance grew stronger. Jason led raids that destroyed convoys in the Midwest. Megan became famous among fighters for her precision strikes. Daniel was known for leading reckless charges that somehow always worked. Their names spread beyond Earth as Laura's hacked signals reached other planets. On faraway worlds, slaves listened to the voices of humans who fought and laughed and mocked the Empire. Some aliens began to whisper in secret, "If humans can fight, why not us?" The commanders of the Empire grew desperate. They gathered more fleets and prepared to unleash their full power. To them, Earth was not just a planet anymore. It had become a symbol of rebellion. They swore to make it an example. They promised that every human would be erased. But humanity had already won something the Empire did not understand. They had won belief. Belief in themselves, and belief that even giants could fall. Daniel stood in the rubble with Megan and Jason one night as smoke covered the moon. He looked around at the ruins of the city and at the people huddled in broken buildings. He raised his voice so they could hear. "We are still here. They think they can scare us. They think we will give up. But look at us. We are laughing in their faces, and as long as one of us laughs, they will never win." The crowd cheered through tears and pain. Their laughter rose into the night. Somewhere above, an alien officer listened and felt something new. Doubt. The humans had planted a seed inside the heart of the Empire, a seed that could not be burned away. The months of war turned into a storm that spread across every corner of Earth. What began as scattered resistance now became a global fire that the Empire could not put out. In the skies, alien cruisers still floated above cities, casting long shadows. On the ground, soldiers in silver armor still marched with weapons glowing. But the spirit of humanity refused to break. Every street, every alley, every ruined building had become a battlefield. And the more the Empire tried to crush the humans, the more they fought back. In the mountains, Laura Mitchell worked without rest. Her hidden bunker was filled with wires, screens, and alien parts. She studied the captured technology night after night, her eyes burning from lack of sleep. Every discovery gave her people new strength. She learned that the walkers of the Empire could be slowed if hit with focused charges on their joints. She learned how their drones could be jammed with simple radio waves. She passed every secret across the airwaves. Fighters all over the world listened to her calm voice and felt hope again. They called her the voice of the earth, though most had never seen her face. In Chicago, Daniel Brooks and his sister Megan fought alongside Jason Carter and his fighters. The city was rubble. Whole blocks had turned into skeletons of steel and ash. But underground tunnels and hidden basements became fortresses. Jason trained civilians to fight as soldiers. Megan became skilled at setting traps and planting explosives. Daniel never stopped joking even when the walls shook from alien blasts. At night, they gathered around fires, sharing bread and water. They laughed at their misery and turned fear into courage. Their laughter echoed through the tunnels, and the soldiers above began to fear the sound. The Empire increased its efforts. They dropped more troops and brought in heavier machines. They thought more firepower would silence resistance. But humans did not fight with numbers or strength. They fought with creativity. Farmers in Asia flooded fields to trap armored vehicles. Hunters in Africa led soldiers into forests filled with snares. Engineers in Europe turned factories into weapon workshops. Everywhere the Empire looked, they found traps and ambushes. They found humans waiting with grins on their faces. Jason led a daring raid on a convoy moving through the ruins of the Midwest. His fighters attacked from both sides with rifles and fire. Megan planted charges on the road that sent armored vehicles tumbling. Daniel drove a truck covered in steel plates straight into the enemy lines. The convoy was destroyed and the supplies were taken. The survivors laughed as they carried food and weapons back to their people. The raid became a story told across the resistance, a story that spread even beyond Earth when Laura broadcast the news across alien channels. In the stars, other species listened. They were shocked. They had lived for centuries under the shadow of the Empire. They had never dared to resist. But here was Earth fighting back with everything it had. Here were humans laughing in the face of the impossible. Whispers spread across slave worlds. If humans can resist, why can't we? The Empire knew this, and it terrified them. Earth was no longer just a small planet. It was becoming a symbol of rebellion. One night, Daniel sat with Megan on a broken rooftop, staring at the stars. Smoke still rose from the city. He pointed at the sky. "Do you think anyone out there is watching us?" Megan nodded slowly. "If they are, maybe they will see we are not afraid. Maybe they will see we are worth remembering." Daniel smiled. "Then let us give them a show." He laughed, and Megan joined him. Their laughter rose into the night, carried by the wind through the ruins. The commanders of the Empire held meetings aboard their dreadnoughts. They shouted at each other in anger. They had thrown thousands of soldiers into Earth, yet the humans still fought. One commander slammed his fist on the table. "They should have fallen months ago." Another replied, "These humans do not act like others. They do not fear us. They mock us." The room fell silent. None of them could deny the truth. Fear was the weapon of the Empire. Without it, they were losing control. Laura sent another broadcast. Her voice was calm but sharp. "You believe you can burn us until nothing is left, but you cannot burn our will. You cannot erase our laughter. You cannot kill the spirit of humanity." Across the galaxy, enslaved people listened. Some cried. Some clenched their fists. For the first time in centuries, they felt something rise inside them. Hope. Jason led more raids. Megan set more traps. Daniel charged into more battles with a smile on his face. They lost friends every day. They buried their dead in the ruins. But they never stopped fighting. The Empire was learning a painful truth. Humanity was not a myth. Humanity was a storm. And the storm was spreading. The war had reached a point where the Empire could no longer pretend that Earth was a small problem. What began as an invasion had turned into a struggle that was shaking the very core of their power. Fleets that once conquered whole systems, in days were now trapped in a long battle with a single world. The commanders who once laughed at the idea of human defiance now argued among themselves. Some wanted to burn Earth with every weapon they had. Others warned that if they destroyed the planet completely, they would turn humans into martyrs and fuel rebellion across the galaxy. No matter the choice, the Empire was bleeding. On Earth, Jason Carter led his fighters deeper into the war. His body was covered in scars and his hands shook from exhaustion, but he refused to stop. He moved through ruins like a shadow, teaching new recruits how to fight and survive. Megan Brooks stood at his side, sharper than ever, planting explosives with perfect precision. Daniel Brooks drove trucks armored with steel plates through alien lines, laughing even as fire rained down. Their names had become legend among survivors. In whispers around fires, they were called the Unbroken Three. People said as long as they fought, Earth still had a chance. In the mountains, Laura Mitchell pushed herself beyond her limits. She hacked into enemy systems and found patterns that no one else could see. She discovered weaknesses in their shields and shared instructions on how to overload them with concentrated fire. She showed fighters how to jam alien drones with simple frequencies. Her broadcasts had become a lifeline for resistance groups worldwide. At night, when fighters felt despair, they turned on their radios and heard her voice, calm, steady, unbroken. Her words carried across the stars and reached ears she never imagined. On distant slave worlds, whispers grew into quiet meetings. Aliens, who had bowed for centuries, now gathered in secret. They spoke of humans who fought with laughter in their hearts. They repeated the words of Laura Mitchell. They told stories of Jason, Megan, and Daniel charging into impossible battles. For the first time, they believed the Empire could fall. The seed of rebellion had been planted, and it was growing fast. The Empire responded with fury. They launched massive assaults across every continent. In Asia, entire cities were surrounded by walkers and drones. In Africa, soldiers marched through deserts, leaving burning villages behind. In Europe, cruisers fired blasts that leveled old monuments. In the Americas, the skies burned red from endless bombardment. Yet even in the face of such destruction, humans fought back. Farmers turned fields into traps. Children carried messages through ruins. Engineers rebuilt weapons from scrap. Every person became part of the fight. The Empire could destroy buildings, but they could not destroy the will of a people who refused to kneel. Jason led an attack on a heavily fortified base in the Midwest. The plan was dangerous, and most believed it would fail. But Jason stood before his fighters and spoke in a steady voice. "They think we are broken. Tonight we show them we are not." The attack began at night. Megan planted charges along the perimeter while Daniel drove straight through the gates in a truck reinforced with stolen alien armor. Explosions lit the sky. Fighters poured in from every side. The battle raged for hours. In the end, the base was taken and its supplies captured. The victory sent shockwaves across the world. For the first time, the Empire lost not just soldiers, but a stronghold. Humans cheered through smoke and fire. They had proven the impossible was possible. Laura used the captured technology to dig deeper into the Empire's secrets. She uncovered communication between commanders. She learned that fear was spreading among them. They worried that Earth's defiance would inspire rebellion in every system they ruled. They feared that if humans could resist, then so could others. Laura shared this discovery with her people. The knowledge spread like wildfire. Fighters who once thought they were alone now realized they were fighting for more than Earth. They were fighting for the galaxy. Daniel stood on a ruined bridge one night, his rifle slung across his back. Around him, survivors rested after another raid. He looked at Megan and Jason and grinned. "Do you feel it?" he asked. "Feel what?" Megan replied. He pointed at the sky. "They are afraid of us." Jason nodded slowly. "Good. Let them be afraid." Daniel laughed loud and long, and others joined him. The sound carried into the night, and even the stars seemed to listen. In the Empire's grand halls, leaders debated endlessly. Reports came in of unrest across their territories. Slave laborers worked slower. Patrols were attacked by unknown groups. Whispers of rebellion spread faster than they could silence them. All of it traced back to Earth. A world they once dismissed as primitive had become their greatest threat. They did not fear human weapons. They feared human will. And that fear was something they could not conquer with fire. The war was far from over. The Empire gathered its greatest fleets preparing for a final blow. They swore they would end humanity, once and for all. But on Earth, Jason, Megan, Daniel, and Laura stood unbroken. Their people laughed through pain and loss. Their will burned brighter than any fire the Empire could unleash. And across the stars, billions watched, waiting for the moment. The storm on Earth would spread to their worlds. The Empire prepared its greatest strike. Above Earth, fleets gathered in numbers no one had ever seen before. Their dreadnoughts filled the sky, blotting out the stars. Cruisers and carriers formed walls of steel around the planet. The commanders believed the time for half measures was over. Earth had embarrassed them long enough. They would crush humanity once and for all. Every resource, every weapon, every soldier was brought to the edge of Earth. The galaxy watched as the Empire prepared to end a species. On the ground, Jason Carter looked up at the sky and saw the vast armada. His chest tightened, but his eyes burned with fire. Around him, fighters stood silent, staring at the impossible sight. Jason broke the silence with steady words. They came to scare us. They came to erase us. But we are still here. And we will make them regret every step they take on our world. His words spread through the fighters like lightning. Megan Brooks loaded explosives into bags while Daniel Brooks reinforced trucks with stolen plating. Laura Mitchell transmitted calm orders from her bunker. Every fighter knew the final battle was coming, and none planned to kneel. The first strikes came with thunder. Dreadnoughts rained fire down on cities. Whole skylines vanished in minutes. But humans had prepared. Underground bunkers shielded thousands. Tunnels connected neighborhoods. Fighters used captured technology to jam targeting systems. The Empire destroyed buildings, but not the people hidden beneath. When soldiers landed in ruined streets, they expected silence. Instead, they met traps, bombs, and ambushes. Every corner turned into a battlefield. Every ruined block exploded with defiance. In Chicago, Jason led his fighters through the smoke. Megan detonated charges that collapsed entire roads, swallowing walkers. Daniel drove a truck armed with a mounted alien cannon, tearing through enemy lines while laughing like a madman. Civilians armed with rifles fired from windows. Children carried supplies through tunnels. Old men and women passed ammunition to the front. It was not an army. It was humanity itself rising against giants. Laura hacked deeper into the enemy network than ever before. She uncovered the locations of command ships and shared them with fighters. Resistance groups across the globe launched coordinated strikes for the first time. In Asia, captured walkers were turned against their masters. In Africa, fighters brought down a cruiser by overloading its shields with stolen generators. In Europe, bridges collapsed under convoys. In South America, mines hidden in jungles destroyed patrols. The world was on fire, not just from the Empire, but from the human will to fight. The Empire realized too late that the more they struck, the stronger the humans became. Fear turned into rage. Despair turned into laughter. Soldiers who were supposed to terrify now became targets. Alien commanders argued in panic. One shouted that they were losing control. Another demanded more fire. But none of them understood. Fire could not destroy what humanity had become. One night, Jason stood in the ruins with Megan and Daniel as shells exploded in the distance. He looked at his friends and spoke. "They will come harder tomorrow." Megan checked her rifle. "Then we fight harder." Daniel grinned through the dirt on his face. And louder, always louder. The three of them laughed together. Around them, fighters joined in. The sound carried over the ruins louder than the fire in the sky. Laura's voice filled the air once more. "People of Earth, you are not fighting alone. Across the galaxy, they are listening. Every act of defiance you make shakes the walls of the Empire. Stand firm, stand proud. Show them that we are more than they ever dreamed." Her message spread across hidden channels, reaching worlds enslaved for centuries. On distant planets, workers paused and whispered. They are still fighting. They are still laughing. The spark of rebellion grew brighter. The Empire tried one last strategy. They deployed terror weapons designed to break spirits. towers that projected fear across wide areas. But humans resisted. In one city, Daniel led fighters to tear down a tower with ropes and explosives. As it fell, the people around him laughed so loud the soldiers fled in confusion. In another city, Megan planted charges beneath a tower and walked away without fear as it collapsed behind her. Jason captured one and turned it against the enemy, making their own soldiers feel fear. The towers meant to break humanity became monuments of resistance. Above the planet, the commanders felt dread for the first time. Reports flooded in of losses they could not explain. Armies wiped out by farmers and engineers. Fleets stalled by sabotage. Soldiers demoralized by the sound of human laughter echoing through the ruins. They realized they were not just fighting humans. They were fighting an idea. And ideas could not be killed with fire. On the ground, Jason raised his rifle to the sky. Around him, Megan, Daniel, and thousands of survivors stood ready for the next wave. They were bloodied, scarred, and exhausted, but their eyes burned with something the Empire could never understand: hope. As the armada above prepared to strike again, the people of Earth stood unbroken. Their laughter rose into the night, carried across the stars. And somewhere on distant worlds, enslaved aliens heard the sound and began to believe that freedom was possible. The final stage of the war had begun. The Empire's armada surrounded Earth tighter than ever. The sky was filled with ships so large they blotted out the sun. From orbit, the commanders prepared a strike that would end humanity once and for all. They believed one last push would crush the spirit of resistance. They believed fire and steel could erase laughter. But they were wrong. On the ground, Jason Carter walked through the ruins of Chicago. His steps were heavy, but his eyes were sharp. Around him, fighters patched their wounds and loaded their weapons. Megan Brooks tightened the straps of her gear while Daniel Brooks painted crude words of defiance on the side of his armored truck. Laura Mitchell's voice filled the air with calm orders as she directed hidden groups across the world. They were not an army in the traditional sense, but they were humanity's last shield. The first wave of the final assault came with blinding light. Dreadnoughts fired beams that turned buildings into rivers of molten stone. Walkers marched through, the flames with soldiers at their side. Drones filled the air like swarms of insects. But from the ruins, humans rose. Explosives hidden beneath roads erupted beneath the feet of walkers. Trucks rammed through lines of soldiers. Fighters poured fire from broken rooftops. Everywhere the Empire struck, they found resistance waiting. Megan led a group into the heart of the battle. She planted charges along bridges and tunnels, collapsing paths the enemy needed. Daniel drove straight into the center of a formation, tearing it apart, with stolen alien cannons while shouting and laughing like a man who had nothing left to fear. Jason guided civilians through escape tunnels and then returned to the front line with his rifle in hand. Every action bought more time. Every act of defiance made the Empire bleed. Laura hacked deeper into the alien network than ever before. Her fingers flew over keyboards as screens glowed with stolen code. At last she found the command signals of the fleet. She discovered that if those signals were disrupted, the ships would lose coordination. She shared the discovery instantly. Around the globe, fighters set up transmitters using salvaged parts. They jammed the command signals. In orbit, alien ships began to drift out of formation. Fleets that once moved as one now stumbled like blind giants. On distant worlds, enslaved aliens watched the chaos. They had been forced to kneel for generations, but now they saw humans breaking the chains of the strongest empire in the galaxy. They whispered in secret meetings. They armed themselves with stolen tools. They rose in scattered uprisings. The fire of Earth was spreading faster than the Empire could contain. Jason, Megan, and Daniel fought side by side in the ruins. Explosions shook the ground. Smoke choked the air. The Empire threw everything they had at them, but the three refused to fall. Jason's rifle never stopped firing. Megan's explosives tore through armored walls. Daniel's laughter echoed even when his truck was hit and flipped onto its side. He crawled out bloodied but grinning, ready to fight with his bare hands. Their courage was madness to the Empire, but to humanity it was hope. The final push came when Laura broadcast one last message across every channel she could reach. People of Earth and beyond, today we show them who we are. They think fire can erase us. They think fear can silence us. But we are still here. We are laughing in their faces, and we will not kneel." Her words were carried across the stars. On alien worlds, billions heard them and felt their hearts burn with something they had not felt in centuries. Freedom. The battle raged through the night. Cities burned. Ships fell from the sky as humans overloaded their cores with stolen tech. Walkers collapsed in streets filled with traps. The Empire's mighty fleet broke apart under the weight of resistance. And in the ruins of Chicago, Jason, Megan, and Daniel stood together, bloodied, scarred, and unbroken. They looked up at the sky as the first dreadnought began to fall, its flames streaking across the clouds. Daniel laughed through the blood on his lips. "Looks like they finally got the joke." Jason grinned, tired but proud. Megan stood silent, her eyes on the stars. When the sun rose, the world was still in ruins. Millions had been lost. Cities lay in ash. But humanity still stood. The Empire had not crushed them. Instead, the Empire had shown the galaxy that humans could not be broken. Across distant worlds, rebellion erupted like wildfire. The laughter of Earth had become the battle cry of billions. Jason Carter, Megan Brooks, Daniel Brooks, and Laura Mitchell were not just names anymore. They were symbols of a spirit that fire could not burn and fear could not silence. Humanity had proven that even the greatest empire in the galaxy could be shaken by those who refused to kneel. And as the ruins of Earth smoldered and the stars carried the echoes of defiant laughter, the galaxy understood a new truth. The age of fear was ending. The age of humanity was beginning.